Hello and good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, wherever you are in this fine world of ours. Obviously, this would normally be the Monday night review, but we're actually doing this on a Tuesday because we've got the bank holiday. We've taken in a little bit more football than we usually do. And as you can notice, it's only myself, Adam, because Rory is still swanning it in Milan. However, I'm joined by a good friend. We've got Delta Vec, who is a fantastic Man United fan. Unfortunately, we bring you on again to kind of talk about Man United's kind of defeat again. And we promised, El, we didn't intentionally plan it this way, did we? We did kind of bring you on with
No.
advance warning this time round. But more importantly, mate, how are you doing this fine evening?
I'm all right, mate. I'm all right. I'm starting to get a bit of an inkling that you've got a vendetta against me after some of my comments about Serie A previously. But yeah, mate, not a good result yesterday. I'll be honest. I've
Mm.
got to the point where I've just started turning games off now. I won't put myself through all like what can you even describe about last night? I know we're going to get onto it, so
Yeah.
yeah, mate, we'll get into it. But there's some good points for other teams to be talking about as well. So I won't waste
Definitely.
too much time on Erik Ten Hag.
Well, we will give you that therapy session shortly. But obviously, just to remind those that are watching us right now and potentially listening to us on the Wednesday as it goes out, weekends that was fair to say had its refereeing indecision, could have handed the initiatives to Arsenal, but we'll wait and see. But we've also got to talk about the relegation battles. So, Dell, obviously, it seems like a shootout between Luton and Nottingham Forest, although it looks like it's in favour of Forest. But we'll wait and see because the news of Everton and the insolvency piece is an intriguing story in itself as well. But if we kind of move it to Serie A as well, no one seems to want to cement third and fourth spots. So we'll be talking about that between Bologna, Juve, and maybe Roma if they can get their act together. And then at the bottom, we were just talking offline. How crazy is that? As a league, like with a battle for like survival, you've got approximately around 5 teams in there at the moment in the mix, but we will know probably even more by next weekend. We'll see. But yeah, a fantastic result for Sassuolo, who got a fantastic win against Inter and Udinese under Fabio Cannavaro. Who'd have thought it? They got a draw again. So that's their 18th or 19th draw successively in the league so far this season. Absolutely crazy. So, yeah, guys, if you're watching right now, give us your thoughts as we go along. And Dale, let's dig into your kind of therapy session. I'll try and get that whale music on really low right now. But I've kind of described this section as TikTok Ten Hag because it does feel like time is ticking for Ten Hag. Yeah, there's a lot of rumors about his future right now, but you could have basically said if we'd gone a few weeks back when you first came on to this pod and talked with me and Rory, it feels like almost like a copy and paste of kind of a lot of those things that we talked about then. You could have just brought it into here, and it doesn't matter about the opposition. It was kind of seamlessly fitting in. And I don't know where you go from here because everything we've said on this podcast and through live streams, everyone's broadly agreed. But I suppose you've got a kind of scenario right now of do you just kind of take the bullet and just sack him now and get rid of Ten Hag? Because I don't know what it actually adds to this squad. The squad clearly lacks that respect for him. And it's been leaks about Anthony saying something about him being a bald-headed egg in a group chat, which I don't know. That's speculative right now. And
I'd agree with
interesting
Anthony
that
on
it
that.
came from
So.
that guy, right? But more importantly, I mean, from your point of view, because you're the Man United fan out of the two of us, how do you see the situation? And do you see this ever kind of going in a progressive step with the new owners in place right now?
I think that Erik Ten Hag might actually be one of the greatest actors to ever grace the earth because he had me fooled at the beginning of the season. Adam, we
Yeah.
came into the season signings like Amrabat, excited, performed well at the World
Mm,
Cup, performed well for Fiorentina, and players like Mason Mount proven in the Premier League. I
yeah.
know he's obviously had injury troubles, but it's from the beginning of the season. It's decision after decision, interview after interview. It's always a step backwards. Even when Manchester United win games, they don't win games comfortably. When they're
Mm,
getting results, they are grinding out results. The goal difference
yeah.
shows in that. We don't have enough at the back, and we definitely don't have enough of an attacking force. I think that's what really has started to get on my nerves. It's the sheer delusion. of Erik Ten Hag. I get we've had injury troubles. Like, it was a makeshift defense last night. Completely understand that. But to come out and then it's just like he doesn't try to defend the players. He defends himself. If you come out and you defend your players, that is a great man management. You're coming out and you're saying, look, I make the decisions on the lineup. It's down to me. But he doesn't do that. He comes out and says, oh, we controlled the game. Like, we never control game. I've not seen us control a game the entire season. And the more this happens, I honestly think, bite the bullet, I would sack him now. I've been offered tickets to the FA Cup final. I don't really want to take them, just simply because, do I want to spend all of that money going to the final just for him to play an absolute dire final again and then come out and say, well, we controlled the game for 6 minutes, so there's positives to take into next season. I honestly, I don't want him managing Manchester United at the FA Cup final.
Yeah, and this is the problem. Like, you've got a lot of experienced heads there as well, which is, I suppose, the most startling thing. Because if you allude to yesterday's match, you've got the likes of Johnny Evans and Casemiro, and there's been a lot made about Casemiro and the kind of style of football that he's playing right now. Because, yeah, I suspect his legs aren't what they used to be. They can't sustain the kind of high tense intensity in terms of the pressing style of football. But equally, you know, it's just the basics. You know, he's not really picking up. And it was interesting from the Udinese goal. He kind of started shouting at others, you know, saying or instigating that they weren't picking up their trackers or they weren't picking up the men. I mean, that's just one area of the pitch that you need to improve on in the summer. And then that's not just kind of looking at defensively. You know, goalkeeping wise, I think Onana was pretty poor. I think it was Elise's second, I want to say, that he was pretty much straight at him and he didn't really get anything. And normally he's a good shot stopper. We saw that at Inter Milan as well. But he just doesn't seem to do that. And whether that's because of just a broken confidence within the squad. But there's also, it feels like just behind the scenes of all of that, there doesn't seem like a camaraderie necessarily. There seems to be like split groups at the moment within that squad. So whoever comes in, right? I mean, this is the kind of question I'm trying to pose here is, who do you see going in there right now? Because there's been a lot of rumors around potentially like your Zidane's, for example, maybe getting someone a bit more progressive, like a Omerim, for example. But I don't see that actually necessarily coming to fruition under Radcliffe, regardless of where he wants to see this kind of team aspire to be. And there's a lot of rumors around Southgate being lingering around. That doesn't feel like a progressive step or someone that would maybe instill that authoritative kind of move. The only one that I can think of is someone called Antonio Conte. And that we know is like almost like a bin fire in itself, because you know it'll be a quick success for Beers. But he wants money. He wants someone to kind of give him the cash to just build this squad and get some more players. So who do you want to come in and replace Ten Hag? Because it's easy enough to say get rid of Ten Hag, but I think there's some issues that need to be dismantled very quickly.
I think there's a few people you can look at. Like, in terms of the progressive, you've got your Amarims. Even you can even look at someone like McKenna. I think we've discussed him previously. The work he's done at Ipswich has been unbelievable.
Yeah.
But each of these managers you speak of, they have a style of play, Adam, and that is it. Is for me, you get Ancelotti or Zidane in, you've got someone who's going to be respected. They have done it all, and I think that is the biggest problem here. Is there is no respect for Erik Ten Hag, and I think you get in a Conte. I don't even think Conte would even be a bad idea now. That's how bad things have got. Like, if we were talking at the beginning of the season, I said, would you swap Ten Hag for Conte? I would laugh in your face. Whereas now, I would bite your hand off, please. Like, do you know? And the thing is, a lot of people speak about what Ange has done at Tottenham. Let's be honest, a lot of the sort of groundwork for that was laid by Antonio Conte. And that's I'll probably get a lot of hate for that. But when you have someone like Conte who's going to come in and be that authoritative figure and command that respect, and it's that team and that togetherness, that's something that's really gone. And Roy Keane, I think, has done it a few times in the overlap where he speaks about when he's had Gary Neville's back or he's had Phil Neville's back or whoever it may be. I don't really feel like that's coming out of the Manchester United dressing room, because everyone seems to be on eggshells. You've got players like Garnacho getting absolutely ripped by Ten Hag in some press conferences, and he's been arguably one of Manchester United's better players this season. And I think he will go on strength to strength. That is the problem we're at here, is the next person who comes in has to get that togetherness. And I don't think Conte is going to be the guy to do that. That's why I think Conte has to go. If that is your core focus, you have to look at someone like Southgate. As much as anyone can say what they like about his management style and continuously bringing Jordan Henderson and to tournaments, the thing that he's always done is he's selected players not just on their ability, but what they bring to the group. And I feel when you are taking that much of an understanding of what people bring to a selective group of that size, who are going to be training together, playing together, do you know what I mean? You spend that much time with people, you're going to want to like them. So I think Southgate would be good in that sense. But honestly, I would go if I'm Manchester United, I'd go for a Kieran McKenna or an Amorim. I would allow them time. And because that's essentially what we tried to do with Erik Ten Hag, but it has failed. And until he can show me or anyone a style of football, Bayern Munich, come and get him, please. Just take him away. But we can say goodbye. Literally, have him on a free. Everyone can be happy, and then we can move forward. But yeah, I feel like the couple of names up there for me are McKenna, definitely, and I feel like I honestly would love 2 years under Ancelotti. You've seen what he's done in Madrid time and time again, man.
Yeah, you can never go wrong with Ancelotti, even though the style has kind of been more relaxed over the last few years. You kind of get the sense that he understands the players. He kind of gives them the trust. And that's the thing that kind of exudes from him when you see him in the Champions League, for example, that even when Real Madrid go behind, he doesn't care. He knows that they'll go and do a business and do what they need to do. Whereas right now with Man United, it feels that they need a guidance figure personally. And that's where I'm bit skeptical about whether McKenna can do it, but he knows that setup, right? And I think that really helps him. I mean, look, Michael Carrick, he's doing wonders at Middlesbrough. I would argue personally, I think it's probably too early for him to be in naturally that kind of role. But yeah, I'm personally off that swaying like you. I think Conte wouldn't be a bad shout. I think he would be quite good, even if it's like a short-term solution, not necessarily long-term, but certainly someone that could kind of make sure that those kind of bad habits just get out of that squad, because I think that is the problem. And there's been like a sense of lack of respect. But we wouldn't be doing this any justice if we didn't allude to how good Crystal Palace have been more recently, but not just recently, but also last night. I mean, yeah, superlatives for the likes of Eze and Elise for that performance, but it stems to Glasner, doesn't it? I mean, it feels like he's starting to instill something really good at Crystal Palace. And we spoke about it offline earlier today about how Parish got a lot of pelters, especially at the beginning of the season, for staying with Hodgson. And he's rectified that issue by getting someone as progressive as Glasner. Now, obviously, Crystal Palace fans craved someone that could maybe inspire them to push this club on. But Glasner seems like the right fit. I mean, what's been your impressions of the last few weeks and not just last night?
I'll be honest. I think Palace are actually one of the most exciting teams to watch over the past few weeks. In terms of, you've seen what they did against Liverpool as well. They've had they put nail in the coffin in a few teams, to be honest with you, this season. And it's not, and I think everyone thinks it's just as simple as Glasner coming in. It isn't. It's that belief in a manager. You can see Eze and Elise, and so we have to speak about Adam Wharton. What an unbelievable signing he has been. We spent how much on Casemiro, how much on Mason Mount, and he is just eased into that Premier League system. And I think Elise, how they managed to keep him, whoever managed to get Elise to sign that contract deserves to have their salary tripled at Palace. But it is great because we did speak about Parish, and we spoke about, it's been a few times where he's made decisions, Adam, and they haven't really been sort of well received by fans, especially in Southeast London. And you see the decisions he's made, and he sticks by them. And he knows, he knew when it comes to the Hodgson decision, he knew it was good. It's almost like him saying, "Look, I'm wrong. I was wrong. We shouldn't have kept Hodgson." And he's now moved forward. He's brought Glasner in, who I think is an unbelievable manager. Going from Roy Hodgson to a guy who's wearing Canada Goose body warmers and Nike Air Forces around the pitch, I'm all for it. And I think another signing is Munoz, the right back, wing back. Unbelievable. And the resurgence of Tyreek Mitchell and the Glasner as well cannot be overset. To me, he's playing like he's trying to push for a Euro spot, because that is a position where England have really struggled to have any players stay fully fit. And if he can put in performances like he did last night between now and the next couple of games, I feel like he's going to really start to give Gareth Southgate a bit of a headache in that position.
Yeah, 100%. I genuinely feel like you've got what seems like a promising squad being built there already, and that was already there, if that makes sense. It just felt like their shackles have been taken off their feet. They can now play a little bit more fluid in terms of the style of football, and you can see it's coming to fruition. The key question, like you alluded to, though, is can they keep the likes of Eze and Elise? Because I'm sure personally they aspire to be at a club that's maybe pushing for the Champions League or at least European football. But for Crystal Palace to evolve and push on, they do need those kind of players. So is it realistic to think that they could maybe just keep hold of them for at least a season with maybe the carrot on the stick to say, if we don't push on, then you're free to leave in the summer next year?
I think that would be the case. I feel you saw with Elise, he was linked with Chelsea. And I'll be honest, I think a lot of people did sort of anticipate that move was going to go ahead. And to be honest, I don't think many people were surprised, because we've seen last season what Elise and Eze were both capable of. And the thing is, they've both had really bad injuries and they've both come back better players. And I feel like that's something that people don't talk about as much. And it's that mentality. When you have that mentality, you've seen it with Eze. His story isn't a secret. He got released by clubs at a young age. To have the mentality to keep bouncing back from adversity and come back better and stronger. I feel like, I'll be honest, if Manchester United were offered Elise, Eze and Wharton today, sign them. They walk into Manchester United's team. And I feel like Glasner's done that. You said playing with that freedom and that belief. It's given Eze that free role to roam around the pitch and not be such of a static. And I feel like Glasner, that's something which he does really well, is that dynamic play and the way in which players can move positions, players can step out of defence and move. And when it's something that Pep has shown that can have great success. And I feel like if Palace keep on to those really good players, and your Whartons, your Ezes, I think Munoz as well, like I said, he's been really great. Elise, if they keep on to them for another season, I wouldn't be surprised to see them in the European spots next year.
Yeah, and I would not be surprised. I mean, I started to see remnants of that Frankfurt side in the goal that they scored against Liverpool when Eze kind of scored that sole goal. But it's all that build-up play, that kind of, that's the philosophy that Glasner has instilled into them. I'm starting to see the fruits of that, and I'm hoping that they can build on this. But yeah, one last kind of thing about this match as well, the form of Mateta as well. I mean, we've been purring about it for the last few weeks. I'm glad I have him in my fantasy football. That's all I'm going to say, Del, because he's scoring me some important points. Not been doing too well this season, it's fair to say, on that front either. But Mateta, again, he seems like another player that has benefited from this kind of free-flowing football that Glasner has instilled. And yeah, I never saw this beforehand. So is this just a case of Glasner getting the better or best out of this type of player, or is it just the players around him creating those opportunities for him?
If I'm right, I think Mateta, where did he sign for Palace from? I can't. I believe it was I believe it was somewhere in the Bundesliga. But I do also think that because he knows what Glasner's capable of, he's going to buy into that, and he's almost given him, even as a striker, to give your striker more freedom to kind of. Because I think what Palace used to do is they would absolutely lump the ball up to Mateta, because he's a big guy.
Exactly. And he's got pace to burn as well, right?
But he wouldn't be able to use that pace in the role that he had previously. No, and you saw what he did to Dalot and Casemiro. He absolutely turned them over. But I think, again, when a player has confidence, and not just confidence, but belief by their manager, Glasner's come out and he's praised his players time and time again. If you're in that dressing room right now, just beat Manchester United 4-0 at home as well. As much as it would be nice to do it at Old Trafford, doing it in, I always say it, Selhurst Park is one of the best stadiums in the country, period, for atmosphere. I love it. I love games. I think it's unbelievable. So to do that under the lights in front of your home fans, I think that could be the injection they need to kind of really kick on next season.
Yeah, I was just looking at the team he played for. It was Mainz, and his goal scoring record even then was like 1-4, which isn't terrible when you consider the type of team that Mainz are, their progressive style of football as well at that club. So really good addition. But I think we'll leave it there. that's your therapy session done at least. I know it was very mild, I feel, but we will probably allude to it in future, I'm sure.
I think we've just had enough
yeah.
of talking about him, mate. So he spends too much time. He fills up my socials feed too much.
Well, let's kind of help you along. We'll go to talk about Ange Ball and it's defenseless, mate, because unfortunately their defense was pretty horrific against Liverpool. Yeah, I don't know what I can say about this performance, but it didn't feel like a lot of the Spurs players had much thoughts about staying at the club. And this was something of a common theme that I've been listening to in the last few days, is that people feel that this is the inevitable, that Ange is starting to hang out what he's had to deal with. You know, these players aren't necessarily sometimes building into what his philosophy is, but also just doing the basics. You know, you saw the shouting at the Chelsea match, for example, stop passing it backwards, for example. But the key question here is, how much can the Spurs fan base just kind of settle down and expect, you know, that, you know, there's going to be some bumpy moments as they go along? Because I feel like people forget at the beginning of the season, look, Harry Kane left the club. That's quite a big share of goals that kind of disappeared, and they kind of covered it for the majority of the season. But what was alluded to as well about Ange is, obviously, when he was previously at Celtic, they used to be really intense for the first half an hour, and they'd pretty much obliterate most sides in the league. But in the Premier League, obviously, it's a different story. So how much of this aspect of Spurs' recent form is that down to Ange's style of tactics, or do you feel there's an element of both? Because, you know, I think there's certain players that we can maybe speculate that probably won't be there next summer. But do you feel like maybe there's a combination that Ange needs to maybe tweak his tactics, perhaps?
I think it's a mix of both, to be honest with you. I feel like I spoke about when we spoke about Conte, in the sense that a lot of that squad isn't Ange's squad, but he's managed to get them playing. So I feel like he's gained a lot of trust from Daniel Levy in the performance. Because someone said to you at the beginning of the season, Tottenham are going to be battling for European places. I feel like most Tottenham fans would have been like, you know what, I will take European football next season. I would be happy with that. So to be in the position they are, I feel like they should be quite grateful. Like you said, losing Harry Kane, that not just in his goal scoring sense, but in terms of their captain, and signing players like Maddison. I feel like he started the season so well, dropped off, and you've seen his performances kind of really take a hard hit in the press as well. So we're in a position now where I think those few players, instead of fighting for their jobs, then they've kind of given up. And I think you saw that in the attitude against Liverpool. But the players who are still there, you can see the fight that's in them. And I think those are the positives to take from this, that there are still players at the club who do care. It's not a Manchester United where every single head's dropping. Sorry to go back to that, but I feel like there's a lot of positives for Tottenham to take. And if you were to ask, like you said, if you were to ask a Tottenham fan when Ange signed what they would be anticipating for the season, they wouldn't be saying Champions League. So to be in the European places, I feel like they should take it as a positive. And next season, they could well go on to push for Champions League football. Obviously, Liverpool have got Arne Slot coming in, and there's going to be a lot of changes around rulings and whatever else. So I feel like I feel like Ange still has a lot more that he can show. A couple more players that would sort of buy into his mentality, I feel like they could really push on. But it's all about that big man at the top, Daniel Levy, whether he's going to back Ange in the transfer market after those performances against Liverpool. Because in January, it seemed like, you know what, it seemed like he was absolutely ecstatic with his manager. But it seems like performances like that, you know what Daniel Levy can be like. He can turn very quickly.
Yes.
So I listen, if you want to sack Ange and let him go to Man United, fine. But I don't think it's going to be coming anytime soon, because I feel like Spurs are on a journey to something very big.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, Daniel Levy should look at his previous two kind of appointments and learn from those experiences, and maybe realize that maybe he needs to give the manager a bit more time, because necessarily I don't think everything was the fault of Conte or the fault of Mourinho or Nuno Espirito Santo in between that as well. But if we think about this whole Spurs aspect, Kane was inevitably going to go. You know, I didn't see that ever not happening, but I think it was always going to be a case of there's going to be a transitional kind of period for Spurs. And this season was always going to be that. I think where they performed probably higher than they expected to be. So for me, I think this is natural progress. But yeah, I think recent performances haven't been enduring. So therefore, there is that question mark. And, you know, it's things like the basics, like your set pieces, where they're just getting it brutally wrong. Obviously, Vicario might be kind of highlighted as a bit of a weakness from those positions as well. Maybe his command of the box, but then also just defensively, I saw in this game against Liverpool, Mickey van der Ven, you know, letting a ball go past him and almost Mo Salah gets on the end of it. And that would have made it 5-1, I think it was at the time. So, you know, you've got these, even the better players within that squad, you know, just having those lapses of concentration. And I wonder if they're just mentally just tired. I think that's what it is. They just haven't got these squads maybe to sustain the whole season as they've been playing. But I think if there's anything to be learned from Ange, this was kind of very similar kind of vibes with Celtic. The first season wasn't necessarily fruitful because they were pushing Rangers. But again, it was all about getting that philosophy into play. And the second season, they followed it up with trophies. So maybe there is some fruit to be learned there. And I think maybe, look, Ange has probably got an eye of certain players that he wants to move on and probably bring in himself. So, but Dale, if we quickly move into Liverpool, obviously, I don't know if necessarily they played well because I think Spurs made it easy for them. But this is the kind of confidence that they need to kind of maybe challenge the likes of Man City and Arsenal. I do feel that that is going to be really tough to really chase down. But do you take any kind of positives from that game for Liverpool?
Here's the thing: is I would be taking positives if Klopp was staying next season. It could be this could really give them
True.
That's why I didn't really agree with. I don't agree with announcing a manager leaving at the end of the season definitely not as early as Klopp did
In between,
because I feel he's added so much pressure onto his players, and I feel like if he was staying next season now, that's the sort of result where they had a couple of bad results. You get a win that gives you confidence to close the season out well. You then go into pre-season with a lot more confidence, that then pushes you on. But now Liverpool are in the position of, right, we've got this great result. Then it's going to be, we've got summer competition this summer as well. So that gives them even less time to kind of buy into the philosophy of Ollie Slot. So I think as much as the positives can be taken, I feel like it's leveled yourselves a little bit in the sense of we don't know what next. They could absolutely turn everyone over. No one knows. I don't anticipate it happening, but there are positives to take. But again, you saw in the behaviour of the Liverpool players in the results that didn't go their way, it seems like a few of those players are heading for the exit door as well.
Yeah, it does feel like that uncertainty has wavered through that kind of team at the moment. Salah's behaviour on the sidelines against West Ham, just kind of an idea of maybe where the cracks are right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see him kind of move to Saudi or somewhere very similar. But that could be really useful for Liverpool to reinvest in terms of that squad as well. But let's move on to the refereeing controversies. If I kind of start off with maybe Arsenal, they managed to go down Bournemouth, but I do feel there were some soft instances here. Obviously, the first one probably to call out is the Kai Havertz penalty, which I think is a penalty because Travers goes slap bang into him. But I'm not too sure about David Raya getting away with it against Dominic Solanke. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts were for that incident, but I
thought the Solanke one was more of a penalty.
Yeah,
I didn't.
Yeah.
I think it should have been. I think they both should have been penalties. But if you're going to give one, you have to give the other. That is my criticism of it. And I feel like the thing that we've always asked for from VAR, from refereeing, is consistency. If you're going to make these decisions, be consistent with it. I understand. Look, you want to it helped Arsenal's goal difference, and they need to keep as many goals out of the net. It looks like it could go down to the absolute wire. But they were both penalties. If one's going to go, and I feel like that's what, I don't know how many times we can go around this, man. I've spoken about it with numerous people and how every time a decision comes up, it's the referee, oh no, it's the VAR people, it's this, it's that. And it's like, instead of pointing the finger, how are we going to get to an area where people are happy with refereeing decisions? You've seen great success with referees being able to kind of relay things on the pitch. And I feel like that's the biggest problem is the energy gets sucked out of these games because there's such an amount of time where is it a penalty?
Yeah.
Is it not? And if you're someone like Bournemouth who, is it a penalty? Is it not? You then get told it's not a penalty. That is your heads are going to absolutely drop. And I feel like that's what's happening here is these decisions, they're taking too long. They're not consistent and they're tearing games apart essentially.
Yeah, definitely. The one thing I was going to say on that particular incident, I feel like goalkeepers have got away with a lot this season. If we look to Man United at the beginning of the season, Onana getting away with Wolves, but there's been plenty of occasions during the course of this season where I see goalkeepers seemingly getting away with those decisions just because they're jumping up and, maybe the imbalance is kind of swaying the referee's decision. But the one thing I was going to pose to you is, do you feel like with VAR, maybe for next season, the idea should be to strip it all the way back to basics and we utilize it for certain things, for example, just to help with that kind of consistency of the game and allow referees and, say, the linesmen and fourth officials to maybe manage the games better? I mean, would that be a bad thing in terms of like realizing that actually, like most companies do, if something doesn't go right, strip it back to the basics and learn from those mistakes and go, do you know what? It's not working. Let's try a different approach. But it doesn't feel like we're going to do that. They're just going to enforce more and more of that control to VAR. I mean, does that seem stupid, or am I just like, I don't know.
I've been so annoyed with it at times this season, and not just as a Man United fan. Obviously, I've benefited it from times this season with things that are non, like you said, but also the decision last night, the Dean Henderson one. It was just like that's going to split fans, and it's going to it will split the officials. And it's like you said, if the officials have less reason to be involved in the game, it allows for football to be played freely. And I feel like there are clubs out there who have managed to take advantage of the VAR side of things, and we've seen it with a lot of wasting time. It's really started, like some of the added times we've had this season has been absolutely insane. I do think in that sense there's been positives in the rule changes, but if we are going to get consistency and get to a stage where fans, managers, players, everyone's happy with what's happening in football, I do feel like we need to strip it all the way back, just use it for offsides. I feel like, and there's talk of the same system we use in the Champions League coming to the Premier League as well. But that would, again, that is just, it is an instant decision, and that is what we need. I don't need 5 minutes of a guy looking at a monitor thinking, going back, going forward. Well, he's going over to the, and everyone knows, when he's going over to the monitor, pretty much means it's going to be a penalty or the goal's going to be disallowed. And I think that's what's happened now. Is we kind of anticipating, when it goes to VAR, people are anticipating the decisions because decisions have been so poor. No one's actually surprised anymore. It's more like this is another bad decision. This is another mistake from referees and people who sat in the VAR room.
Well, just to conclude, Dale, I'm sure Rory is screaming at us right now for not mentioning Ryan Christie and not getting a red card, which again was one that was an oversight by both referee and the VAR. But we'll move on. We'll move on to Haaland demolishing Wolves. He has still got it, right? He's still got it within his arsenal. In particular for that fourth goal, that was an incredible turn and shot from distance. But again, in this match, we had another controversy for the first penalty. Ryan Al-Nouri kind of going for the ball, and misjudging it. I think it was Gvardiol, I want to say, that came in with that shot. Again, really soft penalty. I have to sway on the side of Gary O'Neill. If that's a penalty, then we're going to see a lot more penalties like this. Did you feel that was quite soft?
That was probably one of the top ones of the weekend where I just looked at him. When you're watching a decision go away, and you feel sorry for Wolves because they're a team who, I would say 3-4 months ago, most people would have anticipated that they would have been relegated under Gary O'Neill. And to come in and do the job that he's done and to be fighting against Manchester City, decisions to not go your way, it's going to be an absolute nightmare.
Definitely. Right. Well, we are going to spend a bit more time then talking about the relegation shoot, which is between Luton and Forest inevitably, because we were talking last week, or at least Rory was, about Burnley potentially standing a chance, but they kind of caved in this weekend against Newcastle and they need a bloody miracle to turn it around. However, Luton have been kind of everyone's favourites. Obviously, there was a lot of context and build up to the Friday night game against Everton, where they eventually drew 1-1. Obviously, the Everton scenario where they called in some kind of insolvency firm to kind of look at the liquidation element, which kind of started to spark those rumours of, well, if they go into administration, that's 9 points. That brings them a bit closer to that battle. But Luton, unfortunately, they just couldn't get it over the line, unfortunately. And that's been kind of the form for the last month or so. But I suppose the other element would be Elijah Adebayo is back. He's back from injury. Could he be the impetus for Luton to get some important goals over the next few games? It's going to be a bit of an ask, personally, Del. But obviously, Forest, they are practically clear. They almost need one more win, and that should do it for them. You're nodding your head, so I'm going to head it over to yourself and kind of argue that way. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of Nuno Espirito Santo. I think Nottingham Forest are flattered to deceive. I think they should be doing a lot better with the quality they've got. But you know, I suppose they were aided by the fact that they played Sheffield United, and Ahmed judged with his stupid red card as well. But I'm looking at this. Look, Forest have got Chelsea at home, and then last day away to Burnley, and Luton have got an away game against West Ham, and then home to Fulham. So I'm kind of looking at that, thinking, well, maybe Nottingham Forest edge it, but do you think Chelsea could do Luton a favour?
I hope Chelsea do Luton a favour, because there's been some games this season, the Bournemouth one especially, mate. It was so upsetting. It was you were kind of looking at you were looking at when the first goal went in, you were like, nah. Second one goes in, you're like, surely not. And I think if they don't stay up, they're going to be the games that really eat them up. And the thing is, I don't hate Luton. I think it's great. I think it's great for football because they seem like a proper football club again. And I feel like you've seen it a few times in the Premier League where teams come up like your Blackpools, who they may not necessarily play the most entertaining football in the world, but people just get behind them. And for me, I'd love to see Luton stay up, because I feel like Nottingham Forest need the biggest reality check ever, because they came up, they signed quality players, and again, those managerial decisions really did cost them. I don't think Nuno was ever going to come in and save them. I don't know how, like, a guy who played negative football at Tottenham was going to come into a relegation battle team and magically turn things around.
Yeah, I found that quite a weird decision in the first place. Steve Cooper, very progressive with his style of football. Granted, it was always going to be open in terms of styles of football, because it'll allow more of a kind of pressure on the defense, I would say. But I thought in that second season, he was getting more out of this squad. You know, he got rid of the certain players that maybe didn't fit the philosophies. And it's a shame that he was forced out of the role in place of Espirito Santo. But they've still got the players that I would say on balance, you know, they can do a lot more on the day. Morgan Gibbs-White, for example, I think he's been superb during this kind of season. For Luton, it just feels like, unfortunately, the momentum has just flown by. I think I saw it a few weeks back against Brentford, where just the heads dropped down. And I wonder if just that very moment has tipped it for Luton. I just feel like that confidence has maybe waned and gone by the wayside. So it's going to be a tough ask. But what can we say about Everton as well? Resolutely defending, they get in performances. It's typical Sean Dyche football. But
Sean Dyche in a tracksuit,
they seem to be pulling away. They're pulling away now, aren't they?
You see, I think there's a thing. It's that since Sean Dyche has stopped wearing the suit and gone back to wearing tracksuits, they've got 100% or I think 75% win ratio. So that is it. It's back to doing what Dyche does best. And I feel, again, with Everton, it seemed like things were starting to turn for the good for them. Then they get hit with another points deduction, and they've bounced back. And I feel like it would be great to see them stay up. But if any more points deductions come into, because I don't feel like the relegation battle in the Premier League is going to be done at the end of the season, because I feel like we've got a summer of legal battles and all the other jazz to come with it, mate. Because we're in a time now where you saw it after West Ham stayed up, and there were so many teams sort of trying to battle their relegation. But we're now in a time where there's a few other clubs now being investigated. Rules are
Mm.
kind of being changed, and a lot of fingers are now being pointed, mate. So it's an exciting few weeks ahead, but I think we've even got more of an exciting summer ahead with everything that's about to go on.
Certainly. And whilst we're still on the theme, Mark Clattenburg has left his role at Nottingham Forest. I still don't know what they were trying to achieve there. I don't think he actually knew what he was getting himself into, but that was roughly about 63 days, I think he was in that role. So barely even 3 months when we talk about it. But this is the thing. Do you think this is maybe a sign of where clubs are going to aim if VAR continues to be this inconsistent? Do you think there'll be a lot more kind of professionals in terms of refereeing wise joining clubs as an advisory to them?
I didn't think that the Clattenburg appointment, I thought the whole thing was weird in the way they announced it. And it's just like, but I also, when you look at it, like you said, if you take a step back and look at it, Forest have been on the receiving of some really bad refereeing decisions this season. You are entering a relegation battle. I would have kept Clattenburg until the end of the season, because if they end up trying to fight this case, he's the sort of man, and he's got the experience of refereeing at the top level, so he understands what it takes to be an official in those big games. So Clattenburg, I feel like I should have kept him to the end of the season. But if you're going to give someone a job for 60 days, he probably got a bonus for signing on. He probably got a bonus for leaving. So I think if anyone's happy in this situation, it's Mark Clattenburg.
Yeah, it definitely does seem like it. I felt like he was dishing a lot more of the kind of personal bits that maybe we didn't actually need to know. You know, like Stuart Atwell being a Luton Town fan. I don't know where he was heading with that, but obviously he got tweets out, and then inevitably it kind of created a drama in itself, right? But yeah,
got a bit Drake and Kendrick Lamar in the refereeing world, didn't it? It was a bit weird. It's just like,
I'm just
I've
waiting
never really had refereeing beef. So Clattenburg dish track.
It's just so new, isn't it? Just so new. But like, I don't know if I can give it any time personally. I don't have any time for it. It's bad enough that we talk about football half the time and just don't understand that, right?
Strip everything back, like you said, mate. That is the way to just get back to what's best. Strip it all back. Like, I don't need Clattenburg sitting in the stands of a Forest Luton game analysing how the referee's doing. Like, that to me is weird that is a job in itself. But like I said, Clattenburg would have been. Do you want to come and analyse referees and watch our games every week? Sure thing, mate. Do you know what I mean? It's absolutely crazy.
I sometimes watch that Howard Webb and Michael Owen kind of clips, and that in itself is just so strange as well. Like, and it's bad enough that Dermot Gallagher is on TNT and he kind of tries to give his takes, and it's just like, this guy doesn't even understand the rules anymore. So I'm lost with it all. But just to quickly summarize the other games, Burnley did lose to Newcastle 4-1. Quick word on Company. I mean, I know we're kind of talking about Ange Ball and how maybe he sticks with his philosophies, but Company is stuck with his philosophies and style of playing football. He's tweaked it of late. Do you think it was too little too late for him?
I feel like if he tweaked it a couple of months prior, I think they're safe. And that's me just being honest. Because I don't necessarily think that Vincent Company is a bad manager. I feel like there's just a couple of players where they didn't. He signed players with experience, but I feel like they didn't turn up in a way he expected. And not every player you sign is going to play in the way you think they're going to. But I feel like you tweak things a couple of months earlier, maybe a couple of different signings, and I feel like they could have actually stayed up this season. But if I'm Burnley, Company knows what it takes to get that club into the Premier League. So if they do go down, I don't think they should necessarily be sacking him.
No, I think they've got someone that's progressive. Maybe I'll learn from this experience. A bit like Dyche when he went down with Burnley, got them straight back up, and I'm sure they'll be in a better position. And especially, he's signed quite a few players this season as well. So I think with the quality of players that they've got, who knows what they could do. Just quickly, otherwise, Brighton securing a 1-0 win against Aston Villa. I think that was a surprise given Villa's form. But yeah, Brighton haven't been great this season. And Chelsea winning 5-0 against West Ham. And we've already heard the news about Moyes exiting at West Ham and Julian Lopetegui replacing him, or at least it feels like that's going to happen. I don't know if I feel confident for West Ham in the appointment, shall we say. But I think West Ham have been a bit unlucky, it's fair to say, in recent games. I don't know if they necessarily deserved a 5-0 thrashing, but yeah, Chelsea have been really good, shall we say?
Like a completely different team.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's just a lot of people were calling for Pochettino to be sacked.
Yeah.
A lot of people calling for it. A lot of people on Nicholas Jackson's back. A lot of people were saying things about Noni Madueke when he wanted to take the penalty. And those are three parts of that Chelsea setup who seem to be firing on all cylinders at the moment. Pochettino seems like he's got his players on side. Jackson seems like he's got his confidence in front of goal. Madueke's put all of that behind him, and he's now progressing forward and getting this confidence with all these players. It just shows what can happen when you stick with a manager, you buy into his philosophy. And the thing is, Pochettino at the beginning of the season, I don't think he knew his best starting 11, but he signed all these players. And even players that were signed before him, he felt like he had to play. Whereas now I feel like a lot more players are buying into his philosophy. A lot of the players they believe in each other as well. And I feel like we're talking about Comadri earlier. When you have that in a dressing room, you have seen how great it can be. And I feel like that's what really helped Newcastle last season, at which it kind of felt like everyone was together. And I honestly feel like it's how Chelsea have come out of this right. Is all of the media kind of portrayed them as this team who all hate each other and they all want to be the standout star. And they've bounced back from that and ended up playing some of the best football they've played all season.
Yeah, definitely. Right, we're going to move into some Serie A action now. And yeah, we couldn't do it any justice if we didn't mention Sassuolo. The Nero Verdi have completed the only double this season over Inter Milan. It was surprising result. Let's put it that way, Dal. I wasn't expecting this from the outset. I know Inter rotated their squad. You know, they didn't have their household players in the 11. However, they still had a strong enough squad to overcome this Sassuolo side who, yeah, it's fair to say they've been starting to pick up some results of late with David Balladini. And yeah, they got a fantastic result here. 1-0, courtesy of Armand Loriente, a guy that I genuinely think, yeah, if he could be more consistent, he'd be on the lips of a few top clubs, it's fair to say, not just in Serie A, but in Europe. But yeah, this was a fascinating result because this brings Sassuolo within kind of a chance of surviving. And I didn't think this was possible because I've had Sassuolo to just go down the way they've been playing this season. But they stand a chance now because the teams above them kind of help that in terms of that kind of equation right now. But were you surprised at the result, first of all?
Firstly, I was surprised at the result. We spoke earlier before we went live, mate, and how exciting this relegation battle is. If you are not a football fan, if you ever want to explain to someone what the excitement of the end of the season is about, it's not just about those third and fourth spots of Champions League places. It's about that relegation battle. We're talking 5-6 teams nearly, all within a chance of staying up and going down. And we're not just talking about clubs that have just been promoted. You've got clubs in it, like talking about Sassuolo, who, let's be honest, has kind of cemented themselves as one of the better sides in Italy. And now it seems that they've really started to fall off now. And I honestly, if you said to me a month ago they'd be staying up, not a chance. I think the last time I was on, I think they were one of the teams where I was like, could they do it? Could they not do it? And the way they went on, I think they went on a horrible run following the podcast.
They did, yeah.
So to see them now within a chance of beating Inter, but Cagliari, I think they're still kind of involved there. Hellas Verona are still in that. I don't know who's going to go. And that is just in that either every time I make a prediction from one week to the next, is things seem to change down there. I know we've said about Fiorentina, we spoke about it earlier about how many draws they've picked up this season. Those draws are going to be what ends up saving Fiorentina. And these are the things that we've seen time and time again. It's about getting points on the board. And I feel like if Sassuolo do end up going down, they're going to look at that period of where they really couldn't even grind out many points at all, and that's going to be the ones that really end up biting them.
Well, this is it. So we'll just go through the table for those that are listening. So currently Sassuolo find themselves on 19th position, currently with 29 points. Directly above them, you've got Udinese in 18th with 30 points. Then above them in 17th, we've got Empoli on 32, Frosinone in 16th on 32, and then you've got Cagliari on 33 points, and then Hellas Verona on 34 points, and then currently Lecce 13th in with 37 points, which I think is enough to keep them up anyway for now. They only really need a point, I would argue. But yeah, it is so tight because even if you think about Calgary this weekend, fantastic opportunity. However, they got a stupid red card through Gianluca Gaetano. And then literally they were leading 1-0 for the majority of the match. And then Lecce kind of do the smash and grab in the last kind of 10 minutes of the game to kind of bring them a point at least. And that was enough for Lecce. Calgary, on the other hand, this is the kind of results that they needed to turn into wins, I would argue. And they've been doing so well. I would say Calgary are the side that I kind of expected to go down personally, given how well they did in Serie B to get into Serie A. And I thought for the first half of the season, not too bad, but however, they weren't spectacular. They were really poor on the road. And, it was their home form that kept them in it, to be fair. And that's what has been the story of their season so far. Ranieri did kind of threaten to leave, and the squad was like rallied behind him and said, no, we want you to lead you through this period. But it just feels like there's so many twists and turns in this, really, Del. And we might as well just get into it, because Udinese last night, they drew 1-1 against Napoli, and it was in the 92nd minute, courtesy of Issac Success. But that is the 18th draw. Fabio Cannavaro, that's his second game in charge of Udinese. It's been a whirlwind of a season for Udinese. And this is a club that I wouldn't have expected this when you were talking about, Di Natale, for example, Alexis Sanchez, Hamadzic. We've got so many talented players down the years, and they've been kind of that sustainable club within Serie A, the staple of the league, so to speak. They're kind of progressive in the fact that they've got their own stadium now as well. That's something unheard of for an Italian team, especially. But, despite all that, they haven't been fantastic, especially when it comes to scoring goals. Do you think they've got it within them to pull themselves out of it, given that teams above them are kind of struggling themselves?
The thing, I feel like there's a lot going on down the bottom in Serie A, and I feel like here's what is really going to be the answer is, I feel like Cagliari are actually going to be the team to stay up. I feel like Udinese are going to, they're teams where Udinese are a team where I always remember those Di Natale goals, and I feel like that's really where my love for Serie A really started to cement, is when I'm growing up watching Di Natale, who's, in my eyes, if you said to anyone, Di Natale could have played for any club you wanted in Italy, but it was at Udinese, and I feel like that is what I remember them being, is being the working man's club, and sort of the people loved Udinese because they weren't one of the big giants, but they were always kind of getting into the European spots and getting big results against some of the biggest clubs in Italy. And now we're in this position where they could be relegated, and it kind of does leave a sour taste, because they've ended up having such great players go through their system, and in the end, it almost seems like it was all going to be for nothing, because they're now going to get relegated. And we've seen what it's done to clubs previously. We've seen Birmingham City get relegated from the Championship this week, even after investment. And when these clubs do end up going down, it can really have a detrimental effect. So I hope they do stay up, but then I also hope that it doesn't have a long-term effect on Udinese, and they can bounce back from this.
Yeah, and they've got kind of a favourable run when you look at the fixtures here, Del. So the next game is against Lecce. Then they face Empoli. Before that, then they've also got Frosinone last day of the season as well. So, there's some winnable games there. So it'll be very fascinating to see how they can turn it around. But if we kind of also allude to the fact that Hellas Verona got an important win against Fiorentina, fascinating game this was. And we have to call it out as well. We've called it out on this pod. Marco Baroni has done a phenomenal job when you consider in January transfer window, they practically shipped off 14 players, and then they bought in, obviously, a new set of players, and they've managed to get out results. They were kind of in the kind of bottom two for the majority of the beginning of the season, and they've just turned it around with the performances. And, goals from Lazovic as well as Norslin, a player that I think is on the up myself. I mean, it's just incredible. But then we'll also turn it as well and say Fiorentina. It was the typical Fiorentina performance under Vincenzo Italiano. I think their fans just don't know what performance they're going to get out of Fiorentina. And there's a lot of speculation about Italiano basically leaving the club in the summer. but this feels like a clean slate that Fiorentina fans need right now, right?
They're another club where I remember them with this rich history, and they're another one who seem to, when it seems like Fiorentina makes steps forward, it almost seems like within a season or two they're making steps back. And I feel like it does feel like they're turning a new leaf for Fiorentina, but also they need to look at the decisions that they've made this season and show that essentially what we've always spoken about in relegation battles is getting points on the board. And again, as much as they've managed to get points on the board, you can look at a lot of their draws this season and say they're games they should have won, and they could have been a lot higher up the table. So as much as we can say Fiorentina have done great to stay up, I don't think they should have ever been in the position they are.
No.
But then also you look at the teams around them. I think Lecce have done well. I feel like they really they surprised a lot of people. They almost, I'll be honest, they had a good season last season with some of their players, and I feel like this year it kind of felt like it was almost that. It kind of felt like second season syndrome in a sense of with a lot of those players, where the players who were turning up at points last season couldn't really help them this year. But I do think that result of the weekend will save them, and they're another club who I feel like can really end up pushing on. I feel like that's the thing. I feel like the teams who get relegated in Serie A, because there's so many big sides now in Serie B as well. It's who is going to get promoted. I wouldn't want to if you're one of those clubs, it's not just about getting relegated and everything that comes, but it is going to be so hard to get promoted back into Serie A.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And we welcome one of those teams back into Serie A, and that's Parma. And that's been like a 5-year exodus from Serie A in the first place. So that goes to show you, the competition in Serie B is absolutely insane. And we've even got the investment from Como, Thierry Henry's kind of Como, if you want to allude to Cesc Fabregas as well, being the assistant down there. That's going to be fascinating to see them potentially in the playoff games, because I don't think they did enough, unfortunately, to get the automatics. But it'll be fascinating because Serie B, in terms of that playoff mix as well, is just so straightforward wins in those kind of ties as well. So I'll be very fascinated of that one as well. But just to allude to quickly as well, Empoli got a draw against Frosinone over the weekend, 0-0. So nothing to write about there, but that kind of intensifies that relegation battle there, Del.
I think we're kind of happy that there wasn't a win for either side, because it's made that relegation battle that much more interesting.
Exactly. That's what we needed, right? We wanted it to extend at least to the last day of the season. That could be, if it happens, last day of the season where 5 teams are still in the mix, that is one hell of a relegation battle. That's all I'm going to say. We are going to move on, and we're going to talk about Inter's rivals, that is Milan. They currently find themselves in second spot as it currently stands right now. They drew over the weekend against Genoa 3-3. And the Milan Curva Sud made it known to everyone in the grounds that they weren't happy with the performances and the direction of the club. They emptied the stands very quickly with banners displayed with Il Rumore del Silenzio, which basically means the sound of silence, which basically they're alluding to the fact that, look, they're not going to make any noise if they can't get behind this team right now. They're really frustrated with the way Milan have gone about it. I mean, look, I think from our point of view, we see them as being second place behind Inter, an Inter team that's been superb for the majority of the season. But I think the frustration is that they haven't competed against the likes of Inter, but they haven't even laid a glove on them when it comes to those match. And, it does feel like at the moment there's a lot of split feelings about whether it's Pioli, whether it's the board, strategy. We saw the kind of remnants of it when Maldini left in the summer. There was kind of that ill feeling around how they dealt with that situation in particular. There's a big mess, really. That's all I can see is it's a huge mess at the moment. They've even tried to instigate who's going to replace Pioli in a role, and Lopetegui was kind of linked. Now it seems like it's gone past that. But I genuinely don't know what is going on at that club. Do you think there is an issue at Milan, a bit similar to that Man United scenario, or are people making it bigger than it actually is?
I would describe Milan as Manchester United last season, in the sense of, if you were an outsider looking in, you'd look at them and say, well, finishing second in the league, you're getting Champions League football. It's not really a bad result. But when you realise that Milan team ended up winning Serie A, and they didn't really end up going on to do anything after that. And I feel like Inter have seen the mistakes in which they made when they won the last time they won the Serie A, and I feel like they've signed some real great experienced players, but they've also signed some future stars, and I feel like that Inter team is really exciting. And we're now in a space where Milan have got exciting players, but they don't play exciting football, and it doesn't seem like any of the fans are excited. And again, it reminds me of Manchester United in the sense of pointing the finger and saying, well, it's this person's fault or it's that person's fault. And to get rid of someone like Maldini, I feel like the warning signs were there and we would just ignore them at the beginning of the season. So I feel like to get rid of Maldini, someone who gave everything for that club, just kind of, it felt like a bit of a slap in the face to a legend. And but those are things I don't like.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think he also kind of invested a lot in terms of the youth. He kind of saw that vision of they needed to buy kind of investment, so to speak. And you can see how they've dealt with De Ketelaere, for example, a kid that came from Bruges, a lot of expectation. In his first season, didn't deliver for Milan. And that was probably too high expectation. They spent 30 odd million. That's quite a lot of money on a kid that has got a little bit of hype, yes, in the Belgium league. I'm sure he's done it in the Belgium league, but the kind of step up to Serie A is completely different. And then you've got a club like Milan, that prestige of a club like Milan, stepping up to that level. I think there was a lot to be asked from Charles De Ketelaere. And you can see with what he's done in that loan spell with Atalanta, when you get your arm around him and allow him to play his natural game, because I don't think they even sussed out where he could play, like in that Milan setup. And that kind of alludes to the fact that Pioli, for me, is tactically so naive sometimes. He reminds me of Ten Hag sometimes, but I don't think he deserves to get that kind of kudos as being similar to Ten Hag, because I think actually his game management is a lot better, a lot more advanced than Ten Hag. At least he gives you a straight answer half the time against games. But yeah, with Pioli as well, like as you alluded to, the football hasn't been enduring to the fan base. You got players that are likes of Pulisic, for example. I think he's been inconsistent. He's had moments in games, and he's had moments in particular games where he's been man of the match, for example, but it's been against lesser sides. And maybe when it comes to the bigger games, they just don't turn up. And I feel like that's been the story of their season. Like when they've got those big matches, like we saw recently against Roma in the Europa League, they failed to turn up. Rafael Leao is another example of a player that has so much potential, so much hype around him. But yet, again, he's just either been injured or just cannot be asked. I mean, we saw the game against Newcastle earlier in the Champions League where he has that chance to just tap it into the net and then he does something audaciously stupid and he misses the goal. So it's those kind of things that I think has kind of combined and made sure that, the Milan fan base are just not happy with the direction. But the problem is, like I say, they have to find a manager that they can get behind. I think obviously Conte would seem like the most natural, but obviously his links with being an ex-Inter man as well as Juventus man, I don't know if that fits the build. My kind of suggestion would be like, look, Thiago Motta, depending on how that situation with Juventus pans out. But then you've got Sergio Conceição, a man that I would love to see in Serie A because of what he's done at Porto. Although, don't wind him up, otherwise he'll say that you've accused his wife or his mother of being a whore or something along those lines. But, yeah. I mean, this is the thing. You need someone that's almost like a project manager at Milan. And I wonder if they also might kind of look at the Brighton situation and sort of see De Zerbi, whether he'd fancy it. What do you think? Do you think they need a progressive manager, or do you think they need someone a bit more experienced in that role?
I feel like they're going to need a progressive manager because we've spoken about the youth setup at Milan and how much Maldini invested into that. I feel like by getting someone in who's just going to be a quick fix, I don't think it solves a lot of the problems there. And it's similar to Manchester United in that sense. But the thing that I will say is they do have some really, really good players at Milan. Yeah. But like you said, it's like your Leaos who are so inconsistent. He was someone who last season I would have loved to have signed for Manchester United. I would have absolutely loved it. But for me, we're now in a space where we're looking at Leao and it's like he could barely make it. There's some performances this season. I don't think he'd barely make it into teams in the top 10. We're now stuck in a space where we're looking at these players and we're saying, is it Pioli? Is it the higher ups at the club? Is it the atmosphere in the dressing room? Now, where do they go forward from here? And I feel like a long-term project is going to be Milan. So I feel like getting someone in for the long term will really help benefit them moving forward.
Whilst we're talking about Milan, it wouldn't do me any justice if I don't mention Genoa as well, because Alberto Gilardino has done a fantastic job. Obviously, he probably won't be kind of even a candidate for manager of the season. I think that's probably going to go to Simeone and Inzaghi, given what he's achieved this season. But again, this is a manager that's come in, obviously got them promoted from Serie B as champions to Serie A, and has done a fantastic job. You know, when you look at the kind of squads that they've assembled, you know, not really highly well-known players. You know, they managed to get some business in the January transfer window with Dragusin going to Spurs, and that's probably been reinvested into the club. But there's speculation that a lot of their players will probably go. And, you know, when you look at the players that are ahead on show, you got Retegui, who's obviously potentially going to go to the Euros. Akopan, who I thought had a fantastic game in particular for this match. But you got Gudmundsson as well. He's been on lips of a lot of clubs this summer as well, potentially about a move. But I just want to highlight Gilardino, what a job he has done for Genoa. You know, mid-table, it's probably higher than they've ever been in the last few seasons in Serie A from my memory, because they've always been kind of strugglers. You know, they've always been in the relegation fights. Alberto Gilardino, do you see a bright future for him for another bigger role?
I feel like he should stay at Genoa another season, but I do feel like in the longer term, I feel like he's someone who could be up managing some of the top teams, not just in Serie A, but internationally. When you see how much someone has brought to a side and the confidence in which they can install in those players and really get them playing a nice style of football, to be honest, without, like you said, some of those big names, we're now in a position where Genoa could really go on next season and push on. But again, that is the beauty of Serie A, is that we've got some great managers that are in there, and it's the top clubs are now almost in the market for a manager. So it's who joins who when, and more importantly is who's going to be staying at the clubs like your Genoas and the Cagliaris and whoever it may be, to kind of help them push on. Because as much as it's great to see these managers making the step up, what then happens to those clubs? Is it going to be a seamless transition where your Mottas and co join the top clubs and your next sort of screen of the managers comes in? But I'm just not convinced. But for me, Genoa, I actually feel like to see how he performed as a player, and sort of you've seen that he went through times that weren't great in his career, and you feel like by bringing that into a dressing room and that understanding with players, you can then go on to achieve.
Definitely.
I thought it was struggled this season.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know if I necessarily had them as high as they were, but they've done phenomenally well. Personally, they've just grounded out some incredible results as the season's gone on. They were at one point, I think they were in the top 6, top 7 at one point. So they were on the cusp of doing something even greater. But then we also had Lecce in the top 3, and that was never going to happen. So there you go. There's the comparisons done. But I'm going to conclude by talking about Roma's missed opportunity, because Roma would have seen that on Friday evening, Bologna drawing against Torino 0-0. So that kind of closed that gap in terms of maybe pushing in for that top 4 mix. They faced Juventus and they drew 1-1 on the night. It was kind of a strange game. I don't know if you saw any of this, but it feels like Roma have just lost a little bit of momentum that they've had under De Rossi. De Rossi's instilled such a confidence in terms of this squad. And I don't know if Jose Mourinho, if he was still manager, whether he would have got these kind of performances, or if they would have been as high as they find themselves right now. But they are just 4 points behind as it currently stands against Bologna. So they kind of really needed a result. And I think they'll be gutted that they didn't push Juventus harder, because Juventus of late haven't been fantastic. You know, a lot of rumors about Allegri's future, but also a lot of the players. You know, there's reports of Wojciech Szczesny declining his contract talks with Juventus and potentially moving on. There's the kind of ongoing conversations about who's going to be there in the summer. But yeah, I mean, Roma, this is a bit disappointing. I feel for them, because I feel like they were pushing them anyway. And Bologna's kind of run of form has been really inconsistent. I never saw it, but I think when you look back at kind of the injury to Lewis Ferguson and that drop off, you can see why they've kind of not been able to see out games more recently. But if we stick to Roma, how have you felt about them? Do you think they've got enough within them to kind of pull themselves into the top four, or do you think it's a bit of too much of an ask now?
I think it is too much of an ask. I feel like they get a win against Juventus and they then prolong sort of that doubt in Juventus's mind and a lot of the clubs around them, in essentially saying that Roma can go on to reach a top four spot. But I feel like even if they don't reach a top four spot, I feel like De Rossi deserves praise for what he's managed to do this season, because he came into the dressing room where confidence wasn't high. They'd just come off the back of Mourinho, and they're now in a space where you can say, right, De Rossi's got them playing again. How does he then kick on to next season? Do I feel like if they were to make the Champions League that they'd be able to sort of make a challenge in that competition? Not necessarily, but you never know. They could end up winning. Here's the thing. I would love Roma to be in the Champions League from a footballing fan perspective, because I feel like Roma are a big Italian club, but for the place and where the club is at now, I feel like making a step up into the Champions League next season might just be a step too far, and it could end up causing them a lot more hurt in the league as well.
Yeah, well, they have to navigate past Leverkusen in the Europa League this weekend, or week, should I say, even, sorry. Before then, they face on Sunday Atalanta away, which is not going to be an easy match. Then they've got the following weekend, they've got a home match against Genoa before last day of the season away to Empoli, who could be fighting for their survival at that point as well. So there's some big games in between that, and I feel like this was the kind of game that they lost out on, unfortunately. But quick thoughts on Juventus. I'm not going to say too much because you probably know my feelings about Juventus. I don't really rate them. I think under Allegri it's very much anti-football. However, look, I don't know what the expectations were from a Juventus fan perspective, but I think they probably expected them to be fighting in the top two as opposed to fighting for third or fourth spot. They will confirm it with a win against Salernitana if they beat them on Saturday, I think it is. But yeah, Juventus, their season, how it's panned out. Would you be disappointed given they're back in the Champions League?
Here's the thing. I feel like the only thing that saves all of the other teams around in the top four is that how well Inter have played. Because if Inter hadn't played as well, it would almost be a battle for the title and that no one kind of wants. That's how it kind of feels in the top four. Is as soon as a team hit form, they lose, go on a losing streak and drawing streak. And it kind of feels like a bit like Liverpool in a sense to me. And that's essentially how I feel about both Roma and Juventus this season, in the sense they've hit form at times, whereas I feel like if Roma win that game at the weekend, I feel like they go on to make the top four. But with Juventus, I feel like you're looking at that team, it doesn't seem like the players are kind of, like you said about Szczesny, he's been one of their better players. And to see now this sort of everything that's happened with Pogba, it seems like Juventus just always seem to make the headlines for the wrong reasons. And they need to start making the headlines for footballing reasons now.
Yeah. And one quick thought, Federico Chiesa is a topic within Juventus in itself, whether they decide to keep him or whether they decide to sell him. Would you fancy him at Man United if the opportunity came up?
Oh, 100%. I get he's had injury troubles, but we've seen the performances in which he's managed to put in the Champions League previously and in other European competition and in Serie A. I get he's been a player that's been injured, but you know the ability's there. And am I going to sit here and say that Chiesa wouldn't be a better right wing choice than Antony? No, I'm not going to sit here and lie to your face, Adam.
No, definitely not. I mean, trying to hoodwink me to convince myself that Antony is better than Chiesa, I don't think that's ever going to happen. But Chiesa, I still think you saw it even against Roma. He set up that equalizer, and it's just those little moments that he has. If he can just be injury free, and you can see the frustration as well, because I don't think he necessarily buys into the Allegri style of football. And he's had his clashes. It's been well known and publicized. And that's part of the reason why I think Juventus are looking to sell him, because look, he enters the last year of his contract this summer. So, you know, if they don't cash in on him, he will leave on a free transfer. And that's going to be a hell of a signing for whoever decides to sign him. But if he has a fantastic Euros with Italy, who knows? You know, this could be a fantastic summer for Juventus to raise some funds. We'll wait and see. But it all depends on whether Allegri is still there. That is the key, because I think if Motta's there, I think you might see a different story. But yeah, Del, I think that concludes the summary of all the football. I'm sure we've forgotten about something, but yeah, really sorry we didn't discuss it, and you didn't let us know in the comments either. So before we let you off, Del, where can people find your work, more importantly?
So my TikTok, my Instagram, and my Twitter is my name @Deltefic. So yeah, you can catch me talking about football, wrestling, or mainly crying about Manchester United, mate.
Hopefully no more crying in future. We shall see, but I'm sure we'll bring you back and you'll be talking about a victory rather than a defeat or a draw. We'll see. But yeah, thank you to those that are watching right now. It's been great having you on, and we'd love to have you back. So make sure you hit the likes and subscribes on the YouTube channel, or if you'd like to follow us on our various different social media platforms, check us out at Anglo-Italian Pod, with the exception of Twitter, where we're at Italian Anglo Pod, because someone else has got that at. So yeah, really frustrating, that one. However, we will bid you farewell. So have a great week of football, and we'll see you on the other side. Ciao, ciao, everyone.
Ciao, ciao.